Oh, Richard Roeper, how I feel for you. I know it's tough staying relevant, especially in the modern day. Things are changing really fast anymore. It seems like every week we all become more irrelevant. I mean, I'm still in my 20s and I feel like I'm 50. It's confusing. Still, how do you feel about Richard Roeper? Well, he replaced Gene Siskel after his death on At the Movies with Roger Ebert. And I'd say at first he was pretty horrible. I don't want to be mean. I'm not like attacking the guy, but it didn't seem like his knowledge of film was as vast as Roger's. He didn't like a lot of films for very silly reasons. He seemed like he was being a contrarian a lot of the time. He showed obvious biases towards certain directors and films, which was fine. But he also, the worst thing about him is he just came off like such a media guy. Like he really wanted to be on television. Like he really wanted to be on talk shows and all that. He never really felt fully like a film critic, like a film buff. As the years went on, though, I think Roeper became a lot better. I really do. I'd say after doing the show for a little while, and even the episodes that didn't feature Roger Ebert, episodes with Kevin Smith or Michael Phillips or A.O. Scott, he would be a lot better. It would still be obvious that he was trying to get what he said in the poster or in a movie trailer. He's a very buzzword type of critic. He would never really go into that much stuff that was very interesting, but he could bounce off other people. So I started to like Roeper a little bit more. There was this laid-back Roeper. So then that show ends, Roeper leaves, and they do a new At the Movies with Ben Mankiewicz from Turner Classic Movies. And I can't remember the other guy's name, Ben something else. It was the two Bens. The other guy was awful. He might be the single worst person to ever be on TV being a film critic ever. I mean, just go look at clips of this time. It's infamous. So then Roeper started doing these reviews on Stars and these reviews on YouTube. And he still seemed like a pretty popular guy. I remember, 8 years ago, Roeper still seemed pretty relevant. If you brought up critics and what they said, Roeper's reviews got a lot more press. Kind of like Peter Travers. He comes up a lot from Rolling Stone. But we're finding in the digital age, where there's so many film critics now, that the old film critics that were famous, and maybe not necessarily for writing in a paper, even though he did write for the Chicago Sun-Times. He was an editor at first, I believe. He was probably more known as a television critic, a television personality. So here's what really happens. Film criticism always was like a lot of things. It was somebody who was probably educated in journalism or in English, maybe even film, and they started criticizing it and writing about it and giving essays and deconstructing it. And that's fine, but it's not something that's 100% objective. It's not totally factual. And then eventually other people can start coming in and doing this job that don't necessarily have the same qualifications, because they're like, well, I can talk about movies. I watch a lot of movies. Just like you don't have to go to film school to be a director. Well, when that starts happening, you go down this road where people aren't reading newspapers. They really aren't watching reviews formatted in the way they used to be. They're watching new kind of reviews. They want longer discussions. They want more in-depth analysis. They want more clips used. People want to see more now. They don't want just necessarily two people talking. Sure, you have the Chris Stuckman type of reviewer who does go back to that traditional, old school, very, very old, like 80s kind of film critic style, just talking to the audience, leaving a lot of information out of it. More selling the film in a lot of ways. But now with the online film critic, everyone's a film critic on their Twitter, on their Facebook. So now that everyone has an opinion that could actually be vocal, because everyone always had an opinion, but now everyone can have an opinion get viewed by a lot of people, it argues the value then. Well, what does it matter if you're a film critic and you work for the Chicago Sun-Times? I have 1 million Twitter followers and more people watch my reviews than read your... Now, I'm not saying me, but that would be an example. More people care about my reviews than yours, so you're not as relevant. Who cares what you have to say? People don't have to care just because you're a so-called professional film critic. And there lies the issue. So they try to cling on to the modern day. Okay, I'm going to be popular on Twitter. I'm going to be popular on Instagram, Facebook, what have you, YouTube. And you see a lot of these old film critics, these old journalists, these old media types trying to come on to the online domain in many different ways. And they're being laid into it. They're not like Joe Rogan or Adam Carolla, or they got into it years ago. And so they've just been able to ride the wave of its success. They're trying to get into it late. And it's like everyone else is ahead of them. It's too easy for everyone else. It doesn't matter if you have a big paper or a network behind you as much, because you don't really need that anymore to get people to listen. And that's what it comes down to with a lot of film critics, is film critics want validation for their opinions. Not even validation, they just want people to care about what they have to say. They have to get these things out. Sure, you have to express these things. But if no one's listening, at the end of the day, you're just masturbating. And that is what you're doing. So this is on the Hollywood Reporter. Now, this is from a New York Times article recently that revealed that a lot of celebrities and journalists and critics and so on, bloggers, were paying for fake Twitter followers to make it look like they had a much bigger social media following than they actually do. Well, one of them was Richard Roeper. So that was with all the backstory on Roeper there. To kind of give us, in my opinion, the context and most likely what leads to this happening, because I would be embarrassed to pay for fake Twitter followers. I'm sure I have some fake Twitter followers because there's a lot of fake accounts on Twitter, but I didn't pay for that. It just happened. Somebody follows you on Twitter and you don't go look at their account. Critic Richard Roeper suspended by Chicago Sun-Times after buying Twitter followers. Roeper's name came up in the New York Times investigation into prominent people padding their social media accounts with fake followers. Film critic Richard Roeper's reviews and columns will not be published by the Chicago Sun-Times as an investigation. Oh, well, I already read that part. Let me move down. Roeper was one of several prominent journalists, sports stars, politicians, and celebrities who had paid to increase their Twitter followers with fake accounts, according to the New York Times report, published over the weekend. Roeper's Twitter following currently numbers over 225,000, but it was not specified by the Times report how many of these followers were fake. In a statement, the Sun-Times editor-in-chief, Chris Fusco, said, "We became aware over the weekend of issues relating to Rich Roeper's Twitter account. We're investigating these issues. We will not be publishing any reviews or columns by Rich until this investigation is complete." A highly influential film critic, Roeper co-hosted the influential. I guess he influenced people going to movies. I hope they don't mean he was influential to other film critics. No. God, Roeper's like as vanilla mayonnaise as you could possibly be. He's one of the reasons I think that kind of film criticism died. Because it wasn't Michael Phillips and A.O.L. Scott, even though they tried to host At the Movies later. By then it was too late. People had already given up. Roeper co-hosted the television series At the Movies with Roger Ebert from 2000 to 2008, succeeding Gene Siskel after his death. He has written for the Sun-Times on a variety of topics since 1982. Oh yeah, I remember he gave Fellowship of the Ring a thumbs down. I'm not saying he can't have that opinion. I just remember he got a lot of flack for that back in the day. I remember I talked to Roeper once in a chat. See, At the Movies used to have this website. It was awesome. I don't know if it exists anymore, honestly. They had the catalog of, every episode. You could watch every review Siskel and Ebert ever did for the most part. And you could watch every Ebert and Roeper. So I watched all of them. I would spend, I think it was days I watched every single review I could think of. I would just keep entering movies and watching all the stuff. And sometimes they would do live chats. Sometimes they would go in there. It was kind of like the Reddit thing, the AMAs, where you talk to someone. And I remember I actually did, I asked Roeper a couple of questions. I can't even remember what they were because this was probably a decade ago. And I responded to me. It was Roeper, and I was like, oh, huh. Because I was a fan. I was a fan of the old show, but I was still watching because the guest critics he would have on, I really liked a lot of the time. Not so much Roeper, but he was a decent host. He had charisma on television. You hear him on Howard Stern. He seems like a fun guy. Like a guy you could hang out with and have a good time. It's not that I don't think he has depth. I just think that he wanted a certain kind of success and to be a certain type. I'm just not a fan of people like this. They're not David Lettermans. They're, I guess, Matt Lauer's. And I feel bad for the guy. It's upsetting to think that someone got fake Twitter followers because they wanted to look like they have more than they do. Like, dude, how many Twitter followers did you actually have? Maybe you only had, 50,000? Maybe even more than that. That's not bad. I mean, dude, you're a film critic. You're not like Brad Pitt or something. You're not, and you're old school. You're not like a guy who just came out the last couple of years. You're an older guy, and a lot of people remember you from that show in the 2000s. I mean, you're not like, I hate to be this way, a lot of people on the internet have more of a following than you, which is fine. You have a job. I mean, Jesus Christ, that's the thing, this guy was getting paid. So why did he care about this? I guess he saw that it was coming, the end was coming for newspapers maybe, and he was trying to make it look like his online following had some kind of, had something to it, so maybe it would lead to bigger things and maybe an online company would hire him. But I'm pretty sure Roeper wouldn't have a hard time getting a job. I mean, he's still a name. Not a big name, but he's still a name, so this is just sad, and it's sad that we've gotten to this point. I gotta look at that. I want to know all the celebrities and everyone involved with this. That's hilarious. All I could say is that it's a scary thing. Things are fading. It seems like you're going to be really rich and hit it big, or that, everything's clicking or something, and then, you go years and it's a dry spell. Yeah, it's tough. You got to take the hits. So I feel bad for Rich, but honestly, at the same time, I don't really care that much because, you know, I don't watch Richard Roeper reviews anymore. I don't care what Richard Roeper says. In fact, I think he's just gotten worse in the last, like, 5 years or so, maybe the last 3 years even. Any review of his I've read anymore. It's kind of like Peter Travers. Peter Travers used to write reviews about all sorts of movies, and they're very interesting, and then now he just talks about, like, the 6 movies that are going to win the Oscar possibly and a few big films, and he gives pretty much the same review. Maybe you get one paragraph of insight, but most of his review is just a synopsis. It gets really boring. Roper does that too. They just explain the movie to you. They don't actually ever talk about the film or anything they took from it. All I could say is, you know, maybe good riddance. Maybe it's time for this kind of thing to die off. And, anyway, if there's any fake Twitter people out there and you want to follow me, I'm at Vamian is the Twitter handle. Please Rewind is my name on there as well. And on this video, like, comment, and subscribe. Leave in the comment section, who's your favorite film critic? And were you a fan of Richard Roeper? Please rewind your VHS tapes before you bring them back to the store.